right, good evening, listeners. Welcome to Motley Crude, episode number 31. I'm Kevin, and this evening I've got with me returning after a long hiatus. Danny, how you doing, man?
I'm doing pretty good. Always good.
Awesome. And we've also got Ryan with us. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well. How are you guys?
Doing great. Doing great. Happy to be
Always good.
recording again. Yeah. So this evening we are now that we've made our way through all of the wild releases that have come out over the last 2 or 3 months. We're just going to be thinking about the future and doing a bit of speculation about what comes next for the old world over the next, 18 to plus months. But before we get to that, let's talk a little bit about what's new in everybody's hobby. So, Danny, you haven't been on for a few shows. What have you been up to over the last few weeks?
For myself, I was in that SBot 360 tournament put on by Val.
Yeah.
And I ended up having to drop out after round one. School was getting a little busy for myself, so I wasn't able to keep up. And then as well, the whole errata came out, and it kind of, for me anyways, put a hamper on kind of playing the old version.
Agreed.
So I bowed out early on. But I played one game into Vampire Counts, which did not go well. I tried a list that I guess you came up with for High Elves, Triple Griffin, and it was fun to play, and it was kind of good, or not good, but funny to play. But still, definitely struggle in the old version, not having any magic. Just like 3 combat characters. The best weapon they can really take is a spear, which kind of sucks. So they can't even get a great weapon.
Yeah.
And they pretty much 2 of them charge into some Blood Knights, and I think I did 1 wound to them. I killed 1, and I'm like, okay, this game's over. Not able to do anything into them. So it was pretty bad.
So I think that list would be a little bit better in the new paradigm of how the game's played.
100%. Without having to deal with magic. Magic's being a little nerfed, which I think is good for the game in general.
I agree. And where your infantry is going to be more relevant, like your big block of, what are they?
A Seaguard.
Yeah, Seaguard. Yeah.
I also messed up, but I had a character blocking my Seaguard from using Drilled and their Naval Discipline. I kind of had him too close. I couldn't change my frontage at all. I'm like, okay, I misplayed there. But it was definitely lessons learned. Besides that actual hobby, some reason, I don't know what happened, I had a kick for Kids Love stuff. And back in 2020, early on, I decided to start collecting a bunch of it. And I was like, okay, I want to see what I have here. And all of a sudden, I started counting stuff up. I'm like, okay, I got enough for 2 units of 16 Wing Lancers. I think I have 11 or 12 Griffin Legion models. I have a bunch of Corsairs I painted up in 2020.
Yeah.
Then a couple characters. I'm like, okay, I think I have enough here. And I started kind of playing around with the good old new recruit, trying to make lists using nightly orders. And now that, Magic's not as required, I'm like, maybe I can make a list here. So I've been playing around with it. And I'm like, I'm going to put some on the table. I started painting some up. So I got 5 pretty much ready. And I think I just need a bit of, I just need to put a matte finish on them. I put a gloss finish on them just for extra protection since they're metal models.
Sure, yeah.
And then I got, I think it's 11 more on my table, almost finished.
Okay.
I just kind of powered through them. They're pretty simple for the most part. So once I get those done, I'm hoping to bring them out on the 20th if I get to play.
Nice. I'd love to see them. Yeah.
Yeah. So I got some bases too. I got some stuff printed as well for some good old bear cavalry for instead of the demigriffs. Kind of push that whole aesthetic. So I'm excited to try that out. I originally wanted to do Knights Panther for them, just for that hatred chaos. Really kind of plays into that whole Kislev kind of variant.
Yeah.
But then I kind of looked at the Blazing Sun, because I think they're kind of cool with the +1 combat res on the charge. And now I think I feel like the strong one, of course, is Knights of the White Wolf.
Wolf, yeah.
Just for that free year's charge, and those cavalry hammers are real good. The wolf hammers.
Yeah, they are. They're very good.
Pretty much lances on the charge, and then halberds on the every other turn.
Yeah.
So, but we'll see where I end up going. But don't need the magic anymore for the most part, so it's fun. I'm excited to see how things go.
Yeah, and you even have like extremely common magic resist item. It's the witch
Yes.
hunter's ward or
Yeah.
something, whatever it's
Yeah.
called there.
It's in my every list. It's like the
Yeah,
first
of
thing I
course.
throw it on the champions. It's like
Yeah,
cool. Now I'm all pretty much immune to magic, or a good
yeah,
portion
that's
of
the
the
way to
armies.
do it. Yeah, I mean, if you've got a -2 magic res in this new world that we're living in, you're pretty golden
You're
for a
doing
gold.
pretty good. I
Yeah,
mean, the old
exactly.
Bloodthirster I was running before had MR3, and I'm like, he was pretty good. I think demons are still, well, I mean, they're not looking great, but they're some of their items are looking pretty good in the
Yeah,
new meta.
I think they're a little bit better off than they were before all the patches and stuff came out. Yeah.
They're better, but they still struggle unless you're taking plague bearers. Like they're not going to do well into the objectives.
Sure.
So
Yeah,
they don't
objective
have
plays
good
rough. Yeah.
infantry.
Yeah, that's not every army has good infantry though. So
How about you
most.
guys?
Yeah, Ryan, how have you been on a hobby front? You've been on a building spree, right?
Yeah, no, I've been finally assembling the bulk of my Empire army. So I finished off 31 halberdiers, um, and 20 dwarf warriors or dwarf longbeards that I've kind of tweaked a little bit to be Imperial dwarf mercenaries.
Nice.
Kit bashed a whole bunch of characters, built some outriders, kit bashed some road wardens using bits from the great swords, and then I built the Doom model that is the Imperial baggage train. Just
Nice. Yeah, yeah. Just
basically it was
everything on
basically
a
a
base.
pile of garbage and some
Yeah, yeah.
horses, but it
Which is
works.
a baggage train. Yeah.
Exactly. There's enough stuff that you can't tell I didn't have wheels for the cart.
Nice.
But there's just stuff hiding the sides.
That works.
Um, yeah.
Awesome. Are you going to take Null Notes to the event on the 20th?
Yeah, I'm gonna bring it to that one, and then I
Nice.
haven't decided what I'm gonna do for Bloodbath yet. But
Okay. All right. That's good. Talk about another Army of Infamy that's had a bit of a glow up with how the FAQ and all and the errata is shaken out. Like Null, I think, is in a better place than it was 2 or 3 weeks ago.
I still think Grand Army has the leg up on not being required to spend points on halberdiers. Like I
Sure.
wouldn't be taking halberds if I didn't literally
You
have
weren't
to.
forced to. Yeah, yeah, sure.
But at the same time, that once per game shoot in 2 ranks from the handgunners comes in handy. So
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and then not having access to level 4s is not nearly as punishing as it was before. And then being able to
yeah,
take that big block of infantry with the detachments in your cores, like, at least plays into the missions now, rather than just being like
yeah.
a cool
I
narrative
guess
thing,
what I'm
right?
saying is all of the things that are good about Nuln outside of like Outriders in core are
Mm-hmm.
also good about Grand Army.
Sure,
Um,
fair. Yeah, yeah.
um, but core Outriders are
Is
hilarious.
nice. Yeah, yeah. Is nice. Not great for Capture the Hill or whatever it's called, but King of the Hill, but for running down baggage trains and stuff, like those are great.
I mean, I could be on the hill at the start of turn 1
Yeah,
and then
fair.
follow up with something else.
Yeah, with the big block. Yeah. Cool.
Exactly.
Awesome.
Cool. What's up with you?
Not as much as usual. So no painting or building really. I've been traveling since our last. I think I recorded like 48 hours before we left for like our summer family vacation, and I'm still on the road now. So no painting or building. I have made a few purchases. I bought as you did, Ryan, the Old World Warhammer RPG that came out. I pre-ordered
Yep.
that stuff. So maybe we'll have like a bonus RPG episode one day, just the two of us talking about that. Um, I played a game for SBot, also the SBot 360, my third game in the event. I messed up that one big time. I was 2-0 going into this one, so I was like aiming for the top 16 cut, and then I screwed up royally. My third game, I just played it like a dummy. I knew better and I should have done better. And yeah, so I lost that game pretty handily, but it happens. Better there than at CCBB. So yeah, that was the only game I played. And then I've been sort of writing up lists for the new world that we're living in right now, with all the changes that have occurred over the last few weeks. And what else? I signed up for a Mordheim campaign, which is going to start in like I think mid-September or October, around that time frame, organized by like the Ottawa Casual Wargamer Society or whatever it's called. So yeah, pretty excited for that too. I like Mordheim as a nice like little secondary game to just go and watch Warhammer things happen when you roll dice, just wacky Warhammer things. Yeah, so that's about it for me. Cool. So let's move on to our main segment for this evening. Actually, before that, we're going to take a quick pit stop. Ryan, you want to walk us through all the upcoming events in our neck of the woods over the next few weeks and months?
Of course. 19 July, there's a doubles tournament at Nexus in Kingston. 20 July, there is a little 3-round tournament at Red Dragon in Ottawa, run by Danny. 23-24 August, Capital City Bloodbath. Please be sure to check that out. The big premium event in the area for the year. 13-14 September, Montreal GT at the Abyss. And 18-19 October, Square-Based Open Toronto 2025, run by our friend Val, Square-Based. And that's really it on our side. And then in November, I don't have the dates, is Du Bois GT in Rochester, which has revived having an old world component since last year.
Nice. Are there tickets on sale yet, or
It's
probably
on
not?
BCP.
It's on BCP. Cool. Good
Yeah.
stuff. I don't know if I'll make it out to that one, but I'll try to go to Val's event in Toronto. Maybe if we all traveled down there together like last year. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm planning to do the same.
Danny, are you planning on going?
I'm not 100% sure on that one yet. I think I might be traveling on a vacation at that time frame now. So it depends on when we end up getting a trip booked.
All right. Well, since you hooked us up with a nice place to stay at last time, I'm going to wait until you confirm before doing anything.
I don't think my buddy has that place anymore, so I don't know if
Oh,
we'll
no?
be able to. No.
All right. Well, we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. That's fine. Okay, good. Awesome. So, all right, let's move on to our main topic for the evening. So, as I mentioned in the opening segment of the episode there, we're going to be talking about sort of what comes next for the old world this evening. As you all know out there, listeners, all of the core factions have been released. We have Cathay, we had the match play guidebook that came out. Sort of like we know a little bit about the future, but not much. So we're just going to have a fun time this evening, sort of wish listing, guessing, and speculating about what's coming next. Before we get into some hard speculation, let's just do a quick recap of the events that have happened so far. So the game's released on the 20th of January 2024. Since then, as I just mentioned, all of the 9 core factions have been re-released with all of their models and battalions and army books and all that kind of stuff. We have they all got an Arcane Journal treatment, of course. We have a brand new faction that has just been released in Grand Cathay, which I believe is the first new faction that we've had in this setting since like 2003 2004 time frame when ogres came out. And then we've had a match play guide that just came out a few weeks ago. Finally, we've had like 4 FAQs over the past 18 months, the last one being really, really massive and impactful. So the question here, Danny, I'll start with you, is, when they announced this project and when it released 18 months ago, and if I would have told you this is the kind of support that we're going to be getting, how would you be feeling about the game's evolution, and how are you feeling about it overall right now?
Overall, I'm pretty positive about how the game's been turning out over the last 18 months. Because I played during 8th edition and 6th edition, and some things got pretty slow. Like in 6th edition, every army got released, which was what I was originally used to. And then 8th edition, when I came back to the game, it was a very slow turnout of armies. Sometimes it would be like 6 months or even longer between another army book. So to see within pretty much a year and a half, like all the armies came out, plus a whole new faction, which is to me, I'm still baffled by how much they've turned out for this game.
Yeah.
I know they're just re-releasing old miniatures and a few new ones, but it's still really good to see that they're like, okay, now we're finally caught up. Everything's released. I think we've seen quite a bit. Like we're now ready to see what else is going to be coming out. But
Yeah, for
yeah.
sure. Awesome. No, that makes sense. Before I jump in, Ryan, what are your thoughts on all the support we've had over the last 18 months?
I think it's great. I'm curious to see if it's sustainable.
Sure. Yeah.
Like, and my only gripe on that front is this is like my old man get off lawn point, but like
Okay.
I get very, very tired when like Warcom doesn't mention Old World for 3 weeks, and then people start screaming on all of my social media feeds that
Game
the
is
game
dead.
is dying
Yeah.
and like players should just run away in droves and stuff. And I'm like, maybe I'm just old, but like the game doesn't need new content
Yep.
monthly to be enjoyable, and especially when half the people screaming either don't actually play the game or play fewer than one game a month. Like,
Sure.
yes,
Yeah.
like there is probably a core of like 100 people in the world who play enough to get bored if there isn't that much content being released.
Sure. Yeah.
I
But yeah,
think
it's one of
during
those
those.
things like we got all the factions. Yes, they can add, a list of things that we'll get to later in this episode. But like there's only so many things they can do, and then we'll hit the end of the fucking merry-go-round circle and they'll just start doing all of it again. Like
Maybe.
that's my only thing. But I
Yeah.
do
Danny.
like the amount of support it's been getting. The FAQs have been timely, relatively timely, and whatnot. Um, and I think they've generally left the game in a, I won't say more playable state, but I will say in a state where the game looks more like what's on the box, which I think was the intent from day one. They just kind of missed the mark on a couple things,
Mhm.
but that's it.
Sure. Danny, you were trying to say something there?
Yeah, it was just more like I know people complain about them, like Warhammer community not putting out enough articles sometimes, and I kind of wish they would put out just like a little hobby articles every so often, like
Mhm.
just from like what they used to do in Old White Dwarfs, which was just okay.
Yep.
We have the Road Wardens, like they have a unit. There's no official models for them, so why not? Is it Road Wardens?
Yep.
Yep. It
Yeah.
is. It
So like
is.
have like a conversion guide, just like here's how we converted them up, and like do that
Yep.
for all those unique units, and it could just be like here's this unit for this week, and here's like 2 different ways or 3 different ways to build them, different bits you can use from within the Empire line, and it would just be something as filler that people could enjoy. Painting guides. I know they're putting out painting videos, but I would still like to see that.
Yeah.
For those, just filler for some people.
Yeah, no, that'd be great. I mean the coverage, just before I get to the question at hand, like the coverage has been pretty on and off at times, right? Where, if you guys think back to the period after Dwarven Mountain Holds released that Arcane Journal, there was like I don't want to say 6 months, but like a 3 or 4 month gap between that and Warriors of Chaos, where there was like not a fucking peep. Nothing was going on. There's no coverage. There's no mention of the game whatsoever. And then you've had other periods, the last 2 or 3 months being like the prime example where it's just been a flood of content coming out. I mean, that's very like, that's a sort of whatever, a minor gripe there, but I mean, it has been, you're right, like sort of on and off, and then having just at least some little hobby focused articles or what have you would definitely be helpful in keeping engagement up and just keeping the faith in the product up, probably. Yeah, so from my perspective, like I'm going to say just up front, I think the support the game has received over the last 18 months has been beyond my like any expectations that I had. I was a bit like in the naysayer camp when the game was first first like teased, and I think it was 2019 when GW released this article on Warcom that like everything that's round becomes square again or whatever, like that, the way that they first teased the game. And I was like, oh, it's probably just a nostalgia thing, where they're just going to try to sell us a bunch of old models and what have you, which arguably has happened, but nonetheless, like I've definitely been convinced, and it hasn't just been like, as far as I'm concerned, a quick nostalgia money grab with the amount of content that they're putting out, the amount of support, the plans that have expanded, a new faction being pulled out, the match play guide, like sustained FAQs, erratas. So definitely feels good from that perspective. So yeah, I'm very, very happy with the support we've had. As Ryan said, I don't know how sustainable that is moving forwards, not in the sense that they're not going to keep supporting the game, but just that, when you have all the sculpts and the molds ready to pump out, I don't know, Empire State troops that you've just removed from your normal product offerings, and you bring them back on, that's less of a hurdle logistically and from a business perspective than it is to create a whole new faction like Cathay, for instance, which requires like years of prep time, and we'll get to that later in the episode there. But like, so I don't know how much they could keep belt feeding us releases over the next year and a half, but I'm excited to see for sure. Okay, so before we really pivot to talk about the future, just like as a last thing to reflect on the last 18 months there, Ryan, what are some of your like positive and negative highlights for the game?
Well, I think my big positive highlight, at least from where I'm coming from, is like the game plays. The game plays tactically, like it plays the way I wanted Warhammer to play, and like when I tried to get into Warhammer Fantasy Battles, I did so at a bad juncture where it was mostly just like smash rectangle into face of rectangle and
Yeah.
cast big magic delete army. Um so Old World, to me anyway, has succeeded at you know making like maneuvering to gain positional advantage over enemy units in order to destroy them and do stuff work. And the FAQ and matched play book have both fed into like leaning even harder into that.
Yeah.
I think the only negative highlight I'd give, and again, this is coming from the like probably plays game too much slash spends too much time talking about it. Space is that like the last maybe 4 months like doldrums period where the very top edge of the game had kind of like solidified or stratified, where like there was 3 or 4 armies that if a 75% competent like tournament player showed up with, if
Yeah.
you brought anything other than those armies, you just weren't winning. Like your game was like barely worth playing. Um some of that got a little tiresome. Um and unfortunately led to like typical internet problems, but where like you had people at the entry level to the game who were afraid to get into it because they were concerned about this boogeyman like high-end tournament list that they were unlikely to encounter just playing their like 4 friends in their little play group.
Sure. Yeah.
So like, and again, I think we've kind of that's kind of been shaken up a little bit, which helps. But that's all. Is like there was. It's not necessarily a negative of the game specifically. It's just a negative of like the overall community experience and the narrative around itself being so focused on the tippy top of uh, tournament play and things like that. That just led to kind of a weird lull in community engagement, until they were like, by the way, Cathay's coming, and then people got excited again.
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely some naysaying that fed that cycle, for sure. But like you're right in that things at a certain level of competitive play did get solved. Um, Yeah, so from my perspective, on the positive side, like I'm going to agree with you, Ryan. I think definitely the gameplay for me is what pulled me in and kept me engaged with the system for sure. This feels like a war game in like the classic GW sense of what a war game is, right? Where it simulates a medieval, in this case, or medieval fantasy battle. There's a lot of RPG elements tied into it, and it's definitely not going down the like the sort of new generation design philosophy that you see in AOS and 40K of games that are much more inspired by TCGs and video games, that kind of stuff. Like it's a completely different way, and board games, completely different way of looking at wargaming, and a way which feels a lot closer to what I'm personally looking for. So definitely for me, that the gameplay has been a big positive. The second thing I'm going to say is the whole Arcane Journal system, I think, is a really solid win for the game. Moving away from army books, codexes, or battle tomes, or whatever you want to call them, and going down the road of the whole Arcane Journal system, I think is just good. The Armies of Infamy are really my jam. Like, there's nothing that I'm more excited about than when they say, faction X is getting these two armies of infamy, and then I'm just like, oh yeah, what's the list like? What's the cool narrative spin on it? What are the new rules that come attached to this thing? Like, I'm really there for it, and I think that's a highly effective system, way more than what they've done in other GW games that I've played over the last, let's call it, decade, since the old world was vaporized and came back. And then on the negative side, I'm going to say I wish that they'd address things a little bit more forcefully and fast from a balance perspective. I think the game came out being generally quite well externally balanced, which we've talked about on the show before. But internally, I think there's a lot of work that still needs to be done. And I think the studio has gone a bit of a roundabout way of trying to address these things by through erratas and facts and what have you. And what I'm getting at here is I wish they would have pulled the lever of points a little bit faster than they did. They did it very in a very limited fashion in the latest FAQ that was released in errata. I just wish they'd pulled that lever and they'd said, the game's been out in the wild, let's say a year now. We had some ideas and conceptions of how it would play when we were designing it. Those have not necessarily borne out how we thought they would. Let's just address these things through the points economy that we've inserted into the game, rather than like not touching at all what I think is the main lever to address these things. So anyways, yeah, that's the negative thing I would say from my perspective, is a little bit slow to move on things that needed to get tweaked. Danny, what are your thoughts on what are your like negative and positive highlights?
One of my positive, I know some people might not like it, is I like the fact that monsters are on the table again. Maybe not as many as there are. Like, just to be able to see one or two in an army is nice. Like, I know giants aren't particularly great, but like to see
No.
some big stuff.
Yeah.
But like, I'm from 8th edition. If you brought any monster, it didn't matter what it was getting shot off with a cannon. 1 to 2 cans, it was gone, and you would lose your investment. So like, I played demons in 8th edition. And if I played into Empire Dwarves, it was like, okay, I gotta figure out how to hide my greater demon behind a forest or a hill and hope that they aren't gonna hit me, and then I hope they misfire to get the value out of this thing. And then even still, sometimes they get in combat and they're not doing much because they get challenged out or they just lose to combat res. And it was just not a fun time. But now, maybe not as prevalent, I can't even say the word. Um, just
Prevalent,
not
yeah.
how, yeah, the Dragon Lords are. Like, I'm happy that they're there, that that's an option, but I'm happy to see that they kind of are being brought back down. Like, GW has realized how strong they were and has dialed that back a little bit. So they're still useful, maybe not auto include in some armies anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Like, some armies still probably will take them for a while, but maybe with the new missions and objectives, like GW actually coming out and kind of trying to get more core. And it was like a positive way to bring more core into your army, was like, okay, here's how to play all these objectives, and you need core units.
Yeah.
Versus many different other ways. I know there's been lots of comps and different things over the span of the year and a half, trying to force people to take more core or take less characters and like multiple different comps out there. But I'm liking how GW has actually come out and kind of push something. One of my negatives is definitely Facebook groups. It's something I was in. I was monitoring them and kind of chatting every so often. But every so often, you just get in and people just arguing and getting mad at each other. And I was like, I have to get away from this. Like, I don't
Yeah.
need people complaining about like, oh, I converted this thing up, and then someone's just like, why'd you do that? Are you just being like know-it-all or do this or that? Or people just complaining that they're interpreting a rule wrong, and people just get into fights. So I'm just like,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna follow any of the Facebook pages. Still there. I
Yeah.
might see something, but I'm not gonna read any of the comments anymore because it
Yeah.
just that part's not great for the community, I think. And maybe there are some more positive ones, maybe local ones,
Yeah.
but there's definitely a lot of bad apples out there for those.
For sure. Yeah, it's like funny that you bring this up because we have a conversation every, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks about just how, I don't know, like negative and and vicious the community can get at times. We had one like 2 or 3 days ago when Ryan and I were like, you know, guys, if you're not enjoying this, like, what are you doing here? This is a hobby, right? So, yeah, I agree with you. I think like at the end of the day, we're all here to we're
Everyone's
all
here
here
to hobby.
exactly for a good
Everyone's here to
time.
hobby. Everyone's gonna hobby different. It's something people have to get past. Like some people really like that competitive aspect. That's what they want. Some people just want a
Sure.
hobby. Some people
Yeah.
just want to paint. Like everybody has their aspect of the game they like. Just because that's not what you like and you think that's different does not mean it's wrong. Which
Yeah,
is like
agreed.
something people have
Agreed.
to get used to.
Yeah, agreed. I don't know. Like, I think we're, I don't know what we're gonna have to do to be able to change that. I think it's common across like not just this war game, but everywhere. But like, yeah, there is a segment of the internet that's for sure no fun to hang out in. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's a negative. I'm gonna toss another one negative on that one too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So let's talk about sort of what's coming up now. So we've got some announced content by GW. It's not a lot right now. There's like 2 items that we know are still upcoming over the next, I think, before the end of the calendar year. So before we turn to like 2026 or just around the end. So we've got the first thing is we have a second, or actually the Cathay Arcane Journals, so a second book for Cathay. That one has been, it's been said by GW that there will be in it a single army of infamy that is the Jade Fleet. Which has like Empire of Man mercenaries available to it. That's basically the only information we have. We also know that Arcane Journal is a bit of a departure from the previous ones because it will have terrain generation, occupying buildings, multiplayer rules, and then a quote load of scenarios in it. So that's so that's definitely interesting, and we'll talk about it in a second there. But that's the first piece of content. The second one that we've got announced is just a tease that was in one of the almanacs for Wood Elves, which basically said that after Grand Cathay, we have another interesting arcane journal planned, which, redacted or whatever there. So something else, let's say soft announced or revealed or teased through an almanac. So I'll start with Danny. Like, any quick thoughts from you on this content that we're looking at over the next, let's call it 6 months, just based on what I've given you right now?
I mean, I'm pretty excited. The new Arcane Journal does sound like it's gonna be. They're trying to push it to everyone. 'Cause if it's gonna have the terrain generation,
Yeah.
occupying buildings, and all this, and multiplayer scenarios, I think that's gonna be really good. I'm hoping the multiplayer missions are a asymmetric kind of mission because like playing a
Yeah.
2v2 is pretty much just play the same scenarios, same amount of opponents on both sides, but have something that's either one side has more points or you're playing 3, 5 player. Like I own the I'm trying to remember what that mission pack
Uh,
is from Aether.
yeah.
Yeah, it's like you can play up to like 5 people. Everyone's got a deck cards. I know it probably won't be that. That's a little more complicated and requires other assets. But I could be excited to see that. Occupying buildings. I'm wondering if there's gonna be new terrain, maybe for that to
Yeah.
show like incentivize. Here's this piece of terrain, and you can occupy it. So maybe dug in position, which I guess is more 40k. But like maybe there's something to be there for that kind of aspect.
Mhm.
So I think that'd be kind of interesting to see, and maybe there's something like maybe There's some ruined buildings. Hopefully, it doesn't get too complicated though, because then it just gets to the point where do you play with it? Because then the rules
No.
just get more and more complicated. As we
Yeah.
already have rules for occupying buildings, and I don't think they were very well written, and they're very confusing to me. So I'm not a person to use them.
Sure.
But otherwise, I'm excited. I'm excited that there's more stuff. There's something we don't know about, so I hope it's a whole other army. But I mean, we just got Cathay. But
Yeah.
so I just honestly think maybe they're bringing back some old models, or something. Maybe they bring with the Empire of Man mercenaries. Maybe they bring back the Ironsides or something.
Sure. Yeah.
Like Ironsides, there's that the swordsman unit from Empire that got referenced a few times. Is that Manan?
Manan's blades. Yeah.
Yeah, like maybe they'll bring that unit back. Like I'm sure they could bring a ton of stuff. They have a huge catalog of old models, like
We do.
from these armies.
Yep.
Yeah. What about you
Awesome.
guys?
Ryan.
Yeah. So the next Cathay Arcane Journal, like I get why it's a separate book, just because they're trying to keep the books a certain size so they stay in the price windows.
Yeah.
Because honestly, like all of this content could have been in the first Cathay book, and it
Yes.
feels a little silly for the Cathay players to be like, "Hi, here's your book," and also, by the way, have you heard about second book? Like, and it's also, what was the Horus Heresy one that was like this? Was it Beta Garmon? Where it was like, here's like 2 unit entries and then like a whole bunch of missions that no one ever looked at again.
Yeah, Cathonia was like that. There was just like 2 tank commander
go.
units in it, and yeah.
Yeah. So I'm kind of getting shades of that, but at the same time, like we have the core rulebook missions, we have match play missions, so it would be great if we had a whole bunch of the more like generic but scenario type missions, like the ones
Sure.
that come in the Arcane Journals, but not like fixed to like you will bring a very specific army to play this mission.
Yes.
So like, those are good for when you're not playing in a tournament, you just want to do something different. Or you're playing a campaign or whatever. So it'll be cool to have more missions that way. The terrain generation and occupying buildings, yeah, I don't care. Like I could tell you, Danny, like it doesn't matter how they implement occupiable buildings outside of scenario play, it probably won't be used.
Oh, 100%. There'll just be one
Because-
person in the tournament trying to use it.
Yeah, because it's like, yeah, buildings being impassable line of sight blocking rectangle is the only fair way for them to exist in a tournament setting.
Sure. Yeah.
I am kind of excited for this Jade Fleet Army of Infamy. One, because of creative other ways to use Empire models, but 2, I have like weird hope that maybe it'll also include something in like how to include Cathayan mercenaries in other armies, maybe.
Sure.
I don't know. I have weird hope. Probably not going to be a thing. And then the something after, I think we'll kind of get into as we go through the rest of our conversation. So
so the only thing I'm going to say on this one really is I think perhaps the way this Arcane Journal is going, the second one for Cathay there, is maybe a sign of how Arcane Journals are going to be looking over the next 18 months for sure. And then after, perhaps also in terms of like, yeah, we've done the sort of base level support required for all these core armies, but here's, a random Army of Infamy and then an extra model or whatever, 2-3 sets of rules that you can toss onto your game to, spice things up or run some sort of campaign or narrative scenario, what have you. Like, to me, the terrain generation and building, occupying, and siege stuff is more narratively focused, and that's perfectly fine and great. And yeah, it's just maybe a different way that they're spinning the Arcane Journals, just to keep having material for sure to release on that front. And then the other one, the redacted one, we'll talk about in a few seconds. So that's cool. All right, so moving into prediction territory. So we also have the Warhammer Big Summer Preview on the 18th of July, 2025. That one is confirmed to have some old world related announcements in it. So I'm going to ask you guys. I'll start with Danny. What do you think GW is going to announce for the old world, or anything that's sort of adjacent to the old world that you could use minis for instance, like an AOS thing or what have you? Like, what do you think's coming out of that big summer preview for us?
I feel like we all know for AOS it's gonna be Chaos Dwarves, just because
Yeah,
they kept
let's
talking.
go.
Even in that preview video, they kept talking about big hats, and everyone knows
Let's
it's a
go.
Chaos Dwarf thing.
Yeah.
So I think that's coming for sure. I would love to see some. I guess I don't know if they're gonna keep expanding these factions. I know at launch there was rumors of like sand mummies for Tomb Kings, but I'm not sure if that was just someone looking at the Tomb Swarms, the new Tomb Swarm models, and thinking those were
Sure.
sand mummies. So if that was a unit, that would be pretty cool to see for Tomb Kings, like some new units. And maybe they'll have another, not an Arcane Journal, but I still think they're going to do battles or something where they include 2 or 3 armies, or even maybe more, and then just have like a new army of infamy. Maybe no new magic items, but maybe new rosters. So I would be excited to see some new units. I know they previewed the pirate hat, and people are going right to zombie pirates or vampire
Let's go.
pirates, and
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think that's still a stretch.
yeah, it is.
So like I'm still thinking that's like maybe space pirates or orcs and for 40k. Then
Sure.
there was like
Rebooting.
the Chester hat, and people were thinking that was Bretonians. Could be, but also could be Harlequins. Like it's the hats are like everyone's. I've seen so much talk from like on Discord and Reddit of people talking about
Yeah.
these hats.
It's vague enough that everybody thinks it's for them. Yeah.
And it's also actually a pretty good way because it has a lot of people talking.
Yeah.
So it's a good way that way versus just people like, I hope they have something really big. And
Yeah.
this just has everyone just talking about everything and thinking everything's for them, as you said.
Yeah.
I would also think that potentially there is a Dogs of War thing coming out. I saw today on Discord someone saying that there was a Dogs of War tag as a searchable thing on the website. And the only thing that was there at the time was the ogre unit, Badland ogres, and then giants because they're
Okay.
kind of Dogs of War units. So there's a chance maybe they are bringing back some Dogs of War stuff, and maybe there's a
Sure.
mercenary book with like a bunch of generic units that are able to be brought in a bunch of different armies. So that could also be where they fit in the Manan's blades, Nuln Ironsides, maybe some other unique units. Maybe have a printed rule for the that dwarf unit, that the dragon, the dragon prince with
Yeah.
the dwarf unit.
Uther's Dragon Company.
Yeah, it's to
Yeah.
the Dragon Company. So maybe finally have a published version of that versus having to buy the unit and get the little card in the box. So there
Sure.
could be
Yeah.
tons of
PDF on the
stuff.
website. Fine.
Oh, is it okay? It's a PDF there. Okay, that's good.
Okay. There you go. Yeah.
So, but I think there could be a ton of different stuff that could be coming out. I know I'll probably, depending on the time, be watching the stream. Just got to see it to believe it.
Yeah.
Because they've blown me out of the water
PM
for some
on
of
a
the previews
workday.
for Old World. Pardon?
I think it's at like 2 p.m. on a workday.
I don't understand these times because every preview is at a completely different time. Like every
Yeah,
preview.
It just
It's
depends
like-
on where it's held physically. This one's held back in the UK, so it's like for us it's going to
Yeah.
be workday time. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'll still be watching it on my phone, so
Yeah.
Either way, I'll have the preview up. I'll be just maybe watching it a little less with no volume. But what about you guys?
Yeah, so I think I don't think there's going to be any massive announcements for the old world, unfortunately. I think the GW has basically fired their load when it comes to the material that they had lined up for this game with in quick succession, Beastmen, Wood Elves, Cathay, the match playbook, and then the second half or the Arcane Journal for Cathay being announced. Like, they're not going to randomly announce, I don't know, like Kislev and slap it right in the middle of two halves of Cathay. Like that doesn't really make sense to me. As much as I'd like it, as would everybody listening to this podcast, I'm sure. So
Yep.
yeah, it's too early, I think, for anything big. I think it's going to be something pretty small. I'm thinking like, let's say it's going to be that for sure. The second Arcane Journal that was hinted at, but that hasn't been revealed. I think that's what they're going to announce, frankly, and it's going to be like probably I'm going to straight speculation here. I think it's going to be like one of those new types of Arcane Journals that they've mentioned they were interested to do in the past, like a specific battle with like two armies, two specific armies getting their armies of infamy type situation. So something like, they haven't talked about very much about like the border princes. So, I'm gonna put it out there, like we'll have an Arcane Journal based around some battle in the border princes that'll give you an army of infamy centered around border princes armies, regrouping a bunch of those units. Some of them are in exiles, that kind of stuff. And then like, I don't know, like an orcs and night goblin themed horde just fighting them or something like that. Like just that kind of quick win, release the gigantic fucking cave squig and the whatever the squig artillery is called back, and give whatever the border princes like a unique character sculpt and call it a day and push that out nice and quick. To keep the train moving between two halves of Cathay and whatever big things they have planned for the future. So and on the AOS side, I think for sure Chaos Dwarves, we've talked about it. You've talked about it, Danny. I think it's pretty clear that's coming out. As a noted Chaos Dwarf enjoyer, I'm very excited to see what those new models look like, what that new aesthetic looks like. If the Blood Bowl stuff for Chaos Dwarfs that they've released over the past, I think it's the past year, is any indication, then I think they're onto something really, really solid. If they decide to take it into an entirely new direction and AOSify it, we'll see. We'll see what that looks like. I think that's all I've got. Ryan, did we ask you at all on this one? I forget.
Not yet, no.
No, yeah, go for it, man.
So I look forward to the look on Kevin's face when they push the delete button on the PDF that his army is pulled from.
Yes, that'd be great.
When they publish AOS Chaos Dwarves.
Yeah, that'd be great.
But aside from that, no, I think you guys were spot on here. Like, I think we're gonna see something about the second Cathay Arcane Journal, and then something about whatever this redacted line item is. But I agree with Kevin that I don't think it's going to be Dogs of War or Kislev or whatever. It's going to be some easy win. Here's two characters, two or three armies of infamy, and like continuing on the theme of the second Cathay Journal being about scenarios, maybe they'll throw campaign rules in this next one.
Yeah, sure.
Something like that. Like and just be like, okay, cool. And I also think you're right that it's probably going to return the narrative to the border princes, because like we started in the south and kind of moved north.
Yeah.
And then like never heard about this whole like Cetra's coming to steamroll the border principalities.
Yeah. This collection of weirdos, yeah.
And like it would also be a good setup if the next thing after that is Dogs of War / Southern Realm / Talea or whatever. So that's kind of where I see it going, and I kind of see it like as things slow down, that it'll be this kind of alternating of like big new thing, smaller, not as much content heavy new thing. Back and forth. But we'll get into that later.
Yeah, and you bring up a really interesting point that I hadn't thought about, but like you're correct. Cetra is supposedly planning an invasion of like the border princes and stuff, and that would be the perfect narrative shoe in for Talea or the Southern Realms to say like, oh, there's actually a threat on their doorstep now. Here you go, another army brought back from the like the annals of history there. So I think that's a really good good narrative hook for sure to feed that. Okay, so just before I move on to like the slightly longer term stuff, do you guys, Ryan, I'll start with you on this one. Do you foresee anything else dropping for the old world before the end of the year, aside from what's previewed on the 18th, presumably that second Arcane Journal and the Cathay Arcane Journal? Do you think there's anything else coming for the game?
So given that usually whatever is shown in one of these preview shows releases within 4 to 6 months of the preview show, like we're having one in July, so by Christmas, and like nothing releases after like the second week of December, really, other than like the big Christmas battalion boxes. So like before the end of 2025, I think the only things we will see like physically in our hands is the new Cathay Arcane Journal, whatever this redacted Arcane Journal is, and the stuff that comes with it, and then a preview probably at Nova that shows us what's coming in like
Next year.
January.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I think we're gonna get. Happy to be wrong though.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on this one. I think like the second half of the year is not going to be as chock filled with releases as the first half for sure. I think we're going to see whatever that second journal is, the Cathay Arcane Journal, and I think that's going to be basically it for the year. There's like 5 months left, 2 releases in there. They've done all the core armies at this point, and I think we're just looking onwards to 2026 at that point. I don't really expect much more for the game until the end of the year. Danny, what are your thoughts?
Pretty much same as you guys. We had a huge amount of releases this year. I don't like we have 5 Arcane Journals already halfway through the year. So I can definitely see it being a little bit slower, and I feel like at most, like maybe if we get some new release, maybe it's Kicknick. Like I know he has rules but no
Sure.
model. I don't
Mhm.
know if there's any other characters that have rules but don't have models out. But I also think like there are things like Forsaken for Chaos Warriors. They haven't been re-released, so maybe some models that missed their faction release might release as like a filler kind of thing.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
But like, no, I don't think there's gonna be a lot of new stuff. Just judging by how much new things have come out this year, just with books and stuff. It's probably gonna be a slower end of the year, and maybe early next year we'll start picking up.
Okay. Yeah, no, that makes sense. That makes sense to me. I hadn't even thought of like the little filler items, the missing random missing models and missing characters and stuff. But yeah, I'm sure maybe they come out. I guess if they put them in there must have been a plan at some point to come up with a kicksnick, like not just create a random name in a book and then leave it there
Yeah,
forever.
but I know like there
They
was that rumor
renamed
of
him and released him for AOS.
yeah, fair.
yeah, there's that. But like
Yeah.
plastic doesn't make sense for most of the named characters. Like most of the new stuff has been resin.
Yeah.
So
Sure. We'll see. Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah.
That's a good thing. I hadn't thought of that at all. Okay, so let's move on to some slightly more exciting stuff now. Let's talk it. I've termed it the medium term for this, like the next 18 months. So once we hit January, the game is like that's 6 months out. The game is 2 years old. 18 months brings us to about a 3-year cycle. So my first question to the both of you is going to be like, first things first here, do you think the old world is going to be running on a 3-year edition timeline, like most of GW's other major game systems, like 40K and AOS for sure? Horse Heresy now is on a 3-year timeline, at least for the third edition, and I think Kill Team also had a 3-year timeline. Like Ryan, what do you think on this one?
So this is an interesting one. Like initially, I thought it was going to buck the trend and be more like how Middle Earth strategy battle game worked for the last eternity.
Mm-hmm.
Where like, you know, it worked out to almost every 5 years that it got like a reprinted rule book,
Yeah.
but it was just kind of like a whole bunch of like we just kept organically adding stuff, and then here you probably need a new rule book. I don't think that's going to be the case. I do think it looks like effectively all of their game systems that aren't treated as quote unquote box games, which
Yeah.
Andrew like cover off on the like for example like Necromunda and Blood Bowl seem to just have a like we're just going to release a box when we feel like it, and it's a completely self-contained game that you can kind of use with the stuff you already have maybe sometimes.
Yeah.
And like even arguably Kill Team is doing that. Like since what I'll call Kill Team 2.0 came out until now, they've like it's more like Andrew's description of Necromunda, where they just keep adding mechanics and like you kind of have to pick which version of it you're playing. But like Kill Team has not gotten a like ground up rewrite.
Uh, you sure? I think it did. Like about a year ago, right? They
Yeah,
re-released it.
so but that's what I'm getting at though is like that like they've re-released the Kill Team rulebook
Yeah.
like 4 times since Kill Team 2.0 came out in 2020 or whatever it was.
Yeah.
So like it's not like yes, they made a big deal about it and it was right around the 3-year anniversary of Kill Team 2.0.
Yeah.
But it wasn't like I wouldn't say it was exactly the same because they had done it like a couple times before that. Like it would be like if Horus Heresy got a new rule book 18 months in
Sure.
randomly. That's
Mhm.
more what Kill Team was doing. So it was kind of funky. But
Okay.
anyway, I do think Old World's going to wind up on this kind of 3-year rotational thing. But my only like scheduling complication in my head is unless we're going to be the game that just releases in January all the time, which apparently wasn't even the plan to begin with. The 3-year rotational thing sees that year's thing
Yeah. In the
release in the
summer.
summer,
Yeah.
right
And
around next weekend,
yeah.
historically. And so, if this year's Horus Heresy, next year, I believe it's 40K again.
Yes, I think that's right. Yes, you're
Yeah.
right. Yes.
And then 2027 would be 3 years for Old World.
Yeah.
Except that would also be the same year as a launch year for Age of Sigmar.
Yeah.
So like, and they're definitely not going to do Old World and Age of Sigmar in the same summer.
No, impossible.
Like, that does not work with like any of their business practices.
No. Yeah.
So it's one of those things like either Old World is on a 3-year schedule, but it's going to continue releasing in like between November and January because its original release window was actually supposed to be November of 2023 instead of January 24. But like, then we're just like the weird game that's on a 3-year cycle but comes out at Christmas.
Sure.
But like they don't. But the whole business incentivization of the 3-year cycle is to create a peak where there normally would have been a sales trough.
Mhm.
And Christmas is not a
Yeah. Yeah.
time when any business has that problem.
Fair.
So that's my weird like in my perfect world head, I like wish somehow the specialist games were like setting themselves up to wind up on like I think I mathed it out. It was like a 5-year cycle where they were kind of always managing to like be just out of sync with the big 2 games or whatever.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think it's inevitable that it's going to be on a 3-year rotation. I just don't understand how they'll fit it into their schedule with all their other flagship products that fill those time slots.
Yeah.
And I also like I know I'm going a bit long here, but my other like concern is that they, we get there, they incorporate 1.5 and a few other rules tweaks and give us, even if they give us a very organic 2.0, I feel like it's going to be, here's 2.0 and here's Forces of like having to buy
Yeah.
another rule book, whatever, but then also having to buy like another $80 Forces of Fantasy that overwrites the one I bought 3 years ago.
Yep.
Is a lot compared to buying a $30 to $40 army book that just covers the one army that I play, or two armies that I play.
Sure. Yeah.
So that's my only kind of reservation, is like, if they do want to do this like 3-year rotation, the cost in books would get real silly real fast, unless 2.0 kind of does what was it 6th or 7th edition did, where it's
Right.
like 2.0 is when your Arcane Journals just start being whole ass army books. So anyway, I think it's going to go that way. I just can't see how it will work. But
Yeah, the scheduling piece is not something I'd thought about. I guess there's like 4 main games now that could end up on this 3-year treadmill, and 4 does not fit neatly into 3. I understand. So yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe Old World becomes the like winter release every 3rd year. Who knows, right? But that is a problem I have not cracked for them, and I'm sure they'll get around to cracking themselves. But like, short answer is yes. I think the Old World will definitely land on a 3-year release cycle, much like the mainline studio games, as well as now the Horus Heresy. So yeah, that's my take on in terms of how the rules and stuff are going to shake out. We'll talk about that in a minute. So I'll keep short on this one. But yes, I agree with you, Ryan. I think we're going towards a 3-year re-release there. So in about 1.5 years, so the next 18 months, which fits well with this segment that we're on. Danny, what are your thoughts on the 3-year thing?
I guess like I know it's probably gonna be 3-year. Like it's pretty much all their games now are going for 3-year like life cycles. But it would be nice to see it kind of expand to 4 years, maybe 5 years, which I don't think it will. The issue with longer lifetime is more erratas, more stuff, which is harder entry point into a game when you have to read. Like we already have how many pages of errata and FAQs, and we're only
17.
18 months into this. Like in another year and a half, 2 years, it's going to be even harder for new people to get in, because now you're buying rule books, you're buying army books that are out of print, or not out of print, but not up to date with the most common rules, which gets a little confusing when someone new joins. They get their army built, and then they show up to an event, and I'm like, "Oh, what do you mean this doesn't work this way? Oh, what do you mean that doesn't work this way?" And they get maybe a little frustrated. Which I mean, is most games, most kind of events you join. But it would be nice to have the game go a little longer, have it breathe. Maybe now that we have everything kind of out, maybe we can have some simple releases. Nothing too complicated. Like, I mean, maybe I know it wasn't the best, but like something like Psychic Awakening or like the old Storm of Chaos have like these campaigns or something like a narrative event to kind of help tie over a few months or 6 months or 4 months, maybe not 6 months, but a few months as a kind of an event. That's something I would like to see instead of pushing for a 3rd year, and maybe a way to kind of incentivize the game to be sold and bring up some sales. Yeah.
Cool.
You still there?
Fuck, I was muted. My bad.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay. Okay.
that explains it. No,
Okay.
so yeah, agreed with you on this one. I think the latest global campaign they had was like what they did for the release of Age of Sigmar 4th edition, where the Skaven were like taking over
Yeah.
Ember, whatever the name of that city was. But like, yeah, so there's some precedent even like not too distant past for them doing it, which would be pretty cool. But I think you do raise like the most important point of the longer these editions drag out, the more baggage you accumulate through erratas, changes, all that kind of stuff. And then the harder it is to onboard people and the more sort of confusing to navigate it gets, which is always a problem I think the companies struggle with. But no, interesting. So we're all sort of in accord here that we're looking at a 3-year timeline. So next question then is I'll turn right back to you, Danny, on this one. So how do you think the old world, let's call it 2.0, is going to shake out? Do you think it's going to be a radical change? Like a 7th to 8th edition 40k change? Or do you think it's going to be something more like a refinement of the rules where you'd see all the FAQs, erratas collected into the main rule book and these sort of offering just being optimized there? Or like, do you think it'll be really radical changes like Horus Heresy 2 to 3 is looking like it is, which is an interesting litmus test for how the SDS seems to be doing things. So what are your thoughts on how all of that would shake out?
I would hope that if the new edition does come out, it's gonna allow you to use your old books until a new one comes out, and hopefully they don't just like new edition. Here's all the new books. Everything before that's completely wiped, because that's always frustrating for anyone going to a new edition. Like I know when we went from 7th to 8th edition 40k, I think a lot of people were okay with that big change because of how crazy everything got at the end of 7th edition 40k.
Yeah.
So people wanted a refresh, and we're fine with that. But I think right now everything's still pretty new. I think people will be a little disappointed. One thing I could see them doing is changing the rules ever so slightly just to nullify legacy factions, which I know is going to be a big thing that people will not be happy with. But I could see them doing that where, like, okay, now people have to buy the new factions, which does kill off, was it 9 legacy factions, which would annoy a lot of people, and you'll probably see people annoyed because they've been doing it for many editions. Like for 40k, they got rid of everything that was Forge World pretty much from the game. They were slowly doing it for years. They've been getting rid of units. Like every time a new book comes out, they're like, and now all these units are gone. They did it with Age of Sigmar, with all the Stormcast stuff, and most of that stuff wasn't even that old. They removed stuff and even killed off a lot of different armies. So I hope they don't do something like that, but I could see them slightly changing it in some way or another, like to do that. But I really hope that instead we do go the way of you can use everything to get through to the new edition, and then 6 months down the line, after we've gotten used to these new rules, then they start releasing new army books, either new army books or new Arcane Journals, something to kind of bring you that army into the new edition. Kind of, I guess, trying to think of other games that have done it. I guess even at from 8th edition 40k to 9th edition, you're still using your 8th edition stuff for a while, then you waited for your new stuff. But then it became feels bad when your army is left out for like 2-3 years or near the end of the edition, and you finally get your book and you've waited like 3 years. Hopefully they don't do that. Yeah, but that's what I could see kind of happening.
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair assessment. Ryan, what are your thoughts on how that transition would shake out?
So to answer the first part of the question, I definitely think it's going to be more of an organic development of the game. And there's 2 reasons why I don't think Heresy 2.0 to 3.0 is a good litmus test of SDS. So one, SDS, from what I can gather from all of the Warcom articles, seems to have more of like a cell type structure where like you have a team doing like, yes, there's one overall director of the department.
Yeah.
But you have a couple different teams seem to be left to their own devices within a certain set of parameters.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing is that, old world, God willing, doesn't have the Alan Bly dying in the middle of writing the rules problem that Heresy 2.0 had. And in the articles about the lead up to Heresy 3.0, there was a lot of subtext where they're like, we just had to start from the ground up because we didn't understand the product we were working with.
Sure.
So I think if like on the assumption that JTY and Danny and whoever else are all still involved with Old World going forward,
Yeah.
that there shouldn't be like a radical like change. And it's the same thing when you look at all the other GW games. Like every time there was a radical tonal shift in the game, it was always because they like brought in a new lead writer who wasn't part of the team before and said, do this. And then the person's like, well, I don't like what the previous work was. And then they just went and did a different thing. So I don't think we're going to see that. So we'll have a nice gradual change. But where I do see the danger space is one, what Danny said, that they will take steps possibly to abandon or minimize the legacy factions. But at the same time, I still believe some of them are going to get formally reintroduced into Old World. Things like vampire counts, dark elves, etc., where like
Ogres.
they've basically been where they've basically been completely replaced in Age of Sigmar, to the point where they can now just be like, okay, cool guys, like here you can have these back. But I think the ones that don't make that cut will just get dropped entirely instead of getting new PDFs.
Yeah.
But who knows? Maybe I'm just a pessimist. And then from that, I'm very curious to see whether the way forward is, because an edition change is the one time where they might actually go big with points changes.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
And I don't see them doing something like, okay, we're going to keep Forces of Fantasy and Ravening Hordes and the Cathay Arcane Journal and all the Extant Arcane Journals. Then we're going to release the core rulebook, and then we're just going to give everyone a PDF that amends the points costs of everything, because that goes into the danger space Danny already talked about, where like you just have a whole bunch of confused people that own books that contain information that's not accurate or useful.
Or are they still going to be selling those when the new edition comes out? So it's like,
What
I
I'm
want to play
saying
this
is, like,
army.
But this is what I'm saying is, like, if they only release a new rule book, the only way to keep those other two books is to either issue a points errata day one of the new edition, or to say that those books carry forward and then do what I said earlier and start issuing army books.
Yeah.
That's like, okay, here's your Empire Arcane Journal that compiles everything that was in Forces of Fantasy and
the journal,
the Empire Arcane Journal. And it's like, that's your new book with everything in it. But again, that can be very confusing. And then, when you're the army that doesn't get released until 18 to 36 months into the edition, what the fuck do you do? But who knows? Like, is it better than the alternative where the new edition comes out and it's like, okay, cool, that'll be $160 just in rule books to play one faction.
Yeah.
Like, so I don't know the mechanics of how they'll roll that out, but they'll need to do something, because going by their trend, that's the one time when they'll make broad sweeping points changes. And there's only really 3 ways they can do that. So
yeah, yeah. I don't know. Frankly, I don't know which way they're gonna go on this one. Like, I agree with you, Ryan, that a lot of the baggage that Horse Heresy is carrying between editions, in terms of some pretty drastic and radical leadership changes, does not appear to be present with the Old World. So I guess that is something to push us along the the argument of, it'll be a pretty soft edition rollover when that comes around, rather than a hard reset. And they typically have sort of a history of doing hard reset, soft reset, hard reset, not doing them like just sweeping change, like massive game defining changes every single edition, at least as far as the mainline studio goes. So I guess those are arguments I think that would lead me to believe it'll be a pretty soft change when we do roll over to 2.0. But then again, I'm not entirely discounting what happened or what is currently happening with the Horse Heresy, where they've bolted on entirely new systems to the game. When you think of like how they're dealing with challenges now moving forward, or where they've, for instance, brought back a bunch of statistics from like, what is it, second edition or even Rogue Trader days, or Necromunda players will be familiar with a lot of these, but like brought in a lot of new stuff. So, and that game was only 3 years old. So I guess we'll have to see is what I'm getting at here. I don't really know. I guess if you put a gun to my head and you ask me to tell you which one I'm betting on, I think it's going to be a soft edition rollover. But we'll have to see. Okay, cool. Let's. And one last thing. Sorry, before we move on. I did. When you were talking, Danny, there about changing things ever so slightly in the rules to sort of discount legacy factions, I had that happen to me in AOS, where between the second and the third edition, they just sort of changed the rules enough and then started releasing army books or battle tomes, as they're called, along those new rules that, like, the legacy factions, technically you could still play, but things had moved on in a way that made them no longer relevant. And then my Chaos Dwarves, which had become the Legion of Asgore, just no longer really had a place on the tabletop after that point. And I think that's you're possibly onto something here for the future. I mean, they've been religious about banning them at all their events, and even in terms of sponsoring other events, like they won't do it if they allow legacy, which is a really harsh stance from the studio that designed those rules. So yeah, I'm not putting past them for sure.
They've been also really pushing that like models don't cross platforms. So even at their events, if you're using conversions, like you can't use bits from 40K for your AOS game or even for Old World, which I think is crazy.
Yeah, I think you're especially like what you're talking about is especially for like armies on parade and stuff where they just outright banned it for some strange reason. But yeah, you're totally right. Even in terms of like how you're using the models. So yeah, I don't put that past them for sure. Okay, so let's move on here a little bit. So now that all the core factions and Cathay are released, let's talk about some of the things that may come out between now or let's say the end of the year, the next 6 months, and then like the end of the edition. So over the next 18 months, what have you. Like let's start with the most exciting first. New factions. Do you guys foresee any new factions being released over the next 18 months outside of Cathay, obviously? And if yes, which ones? Let's start with Ryan.
Yeah. So over the next, I think before the end of this edition, so I guess the next 18 months, that we'll see Kislev as one of the kind of two project factions that they announced like alongside Cathay a long fucking time ago. And I've seen enough rumors of Dogs of War or Talea or Southern Realms, depends on exactly which rumor channel you're getting information from. But like those two things I think we'll see before the edition ends. I think they'll save reviving any of the legacy factions for the launch of the next iteration. And I feel like they could probably fit in one more. Like Kislev, Dogs of War, they got Cathay, and like I'm just at a loss for like what the fourth faction could be, but I feel like they've got space to fit in one more new or reimagined thing, and I just can't think of what it would be. Maybe Norska is like a separate army from Chaos Warriors or something. But
Okay. Bold predictions. I think there'll be new factions, yes, before the end of let's call it the next 18 months, the end of the edition there. I think specifically there'll be two. I disagree with you, Ryan, in terms of whole new model lines. I think there'll be new factions, but not new model lines reintroduced. There'll be some returning stuff for sure, maybe like some upgrades and stuff, but I think it's too early for them to start pushing like Kislev or Vampire Coasts redesign, that kind of stuff. Just because like that is a massive undertaking for the studio. Yes, we know that they've been sort of doing work on it for at least back up to I think 2021 is when the first like teases, or 2020 even, when the first teases for like Kislev, for instance, came out on Warhammer Community. Not even teases, like actual articles about it came out. But nonetheless, I think that like entirely generating entirely new model lines and all the interest and all the community engagement that comes out of that is something they'll save for that next edition, like as a flagship release item. So I think the two factions that I would see popping up over the next 18 months is Talea / Dogs of War. I think there's enough smoke around that fire now between, Ryan, what you talked about in terms of it's a searchable thing in there on the website. The icons for the faction have showed up all over have showed up all over the map of the old world with like descriptions and stuff, which previously for sure they hadn't, and which hasn't been done for any non-playable factions or what have you. They've re-released some old mercenary units too. So I think they're just building up towards that. I think Talea and Dogs of War are definitely going to be coming over the next 18 months. And the next one I would think is, I think they'll split off Norska as its own thing. A few reasons for that. They have all the material to make it a faction because, as we know and as they've confirmed through the almanacs, they do design the faction for creative assembly, like in the background, like character art, army book, all that kind of stuff. Before it's released in the Total War games, and Norska is its own faction entirely in those games. So they do have the material for it, and I think it'd be a pretty easy re-release, like. Bring back Fimirs, bring back that Fimir character, the whatever Irish sounding name I can't pronounce. The character, like the special character for the skin wolves. Give us back the mammoth, you cowards. Like toss that in there, and then suddenly you've basically got enough legs to create an entirely new faction out of Norska, splitting a few things out of Warriors of Chaos there. And that would be, you could do that on the cheap. It generates some interest. Like there's some models that people love in there, and it would be a massive investment from a studio perspective. So yeah, that's what I'm going for. Over the next 18 months, we're getting two new factions. One of them is Dogs of War, and the other one is Norska. Danny, what are your thoughts?
I'm pretty much on there. I definitely can see Norska coming out, and Talea for sure. I mean, in the rulebook near the beginning, it talks about all the different factions, and it brings up. There's a little article about Norska, about Cathay, and it even talks about Kislev. So I could see Talea coming out soon, and then at the end of the edition, maybe have like a little kind of mercenary or small detachment, similar to what they did Cathay, maybe even smaller for the end of the edition for Kislev. And then when the new edition comes out, maybe they'll have a starter box with Kislev in it, and maybe it's with more new Cathay models or with something else. Probably not them, because that wouldn't make sense for them to fight too much. But maybe something. Go ahead.
I was gonna say there is a rumor floating around of another 2-player box, which probably would be the edition launch one of the next one.
Exactly.
Which is a Kislev versus Norska box.
That would make sense because
I would buy the shit out of that. I would buy the shit out of that box. Yeah. Watch me.
but it works perfectly with what all three of us are saying, which is that some combination of Kislev and Norska things will appear at the end of this edition or beginning of the next one in some combination.
Yeah, which I think would be great. Because I would love to have some more Kislev stuff. Like I pulled out, I have during my collection of buying Kislev stuff, I managed to get a copy of what are they called? The Citadel Journals from way
Yeah.
back in the day. And there's a Kislev list that spans like 3 copies, and actually I think it has like the most lore on all the different types of units. The Kreml Guard. I don't know all the different units because they all have not English names, not English first names. So I will
Yeah.
butcher the pronunciation of all their names. But they got a bunch of cool units in there. Pretty much like pistoliers, like some drunken units, and a bunch of different really cool things like the Streltsy, the halberds, which a lot of these things have made it into Total War.
They have. Yeah.
So I would love to see all this new stuff coming out because I've been taking a look at all the different unit options. I'm trying to think of that big giant cannon that's in Total War.
The little
It's big,
Grom.
yeah, Little Grom, where it's just being pulled by 2 bears. It's this massive cannon. It looks pretty badass. So I would love to actually have that as a model. I have also been tempted to. I found a model of a 3D model similar to it, and I would almost be wanted to use it as a steam tank for Empire as a
Yeah.
replacement. But that aside, I could definitely see Telia as being like the thing, or Dog's War being the next thing, and then later on Norska, and maybe even the Kislev. And I can also see Norska having a smaller release to help kind of get it started and have it as like something like Cathay's doing, where like, oh, you can bring in Chaos allies or Chaos units mixed in with their list. So maybe they do that, like have Chaos stuff mixed in instead of Cathay and Empire stuff.
Yeah.
To kind of help
man, if you guys have already sold me, like just imagine what it would do for the game if you have like a 2-player box that has like or maybe release alongside it that little Grom massive cannon pulled by bears, the bear cavalry, the elemental bear, what have you there, and then Norska with a mammoth. Like it would just fucking sell like hotcakes there.
How many you buying?
Oh, yes is the answer. And also when you look at the articles that they did put out on Kislev like about 5 years ago, they did specifically call out that they were working on Little Grom and the Elemental Bear of Kislev as like models for the game. Ryan, the Elemental Bear is like, think a dragon-sized bear made of ice and magic type situation. So just a bunch of cool stuff. So you guys have already sold me on this, but okay, so going back to the next 18 months here for a bit, like returning legacy factions, I think this is a question that a lot of people have on their minds. I know there's quite a few vampire counts and dark elf and you name it fans out there. Do you guys think there's space in the next 18 months for returning factions to be explored? And if yes, which ones do you think are coming back? Let's start with Ryan.
So I kind of hit it before, but like I personally think it'll be an addition rollover item. It'll be like, here's the new version of Ravening Hordes, and by the way, these armies are in it.
Surprise, vampire counts. Yeah.
But with that said, I think the ones that are like ripe for rolling over right now, like kind of crossing that legacy to published faction divide, is Dark Elves, Vampire Counts, weirdly Demons of Chaos, because they're kind of getting away from all of the demony stuff in the other games. Like they're kind of branching out in weird different directions. Ogres, and then like Lizardmen and Skaven, I just don't know. Like
Yeah.
they've replaced most of it, but not nowhere near all of it. For those two, and then Chaos Dwarves, like I swear that they like lost the molds for the original Chaos Dwarves or some shit. Like it's just one of those ones where like I guess if they push out direct replacements for everything into Age of Sigmar, why not? But like it's an army that just has like an army that has a very bad track record of
support.
Of being supported, and it would be super awkward for them to be like, here's a Age of Sigmar Chaos Dwarves, and then like 12 months later be like, here are old world Chaos Dwarves.
Yeah.
Like they're just so I feel like that one's probably stuck at least for a little while. And
Yeah.
even like that's why I say vampire counts, like they've finished replacing everything or almost everything. But I feel like it's gotta be 12 to 18 more months before they go, okay, old world, you get your here's all the old vampire counts models re-released. They're yours now. Um I feel like their marketing department won't let the like Age of Sigmar bit and the Old World bit be too close together.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense to me. Yeah, I think it's like it's too early for the discussion on returning legacy factions. They have put quite a bit of effort into saying how like these things are not these factions are not allowed at events. They're no longer going to be supported. We're pretending they don't exist anymore. If they screw with the meta of the game at all your events, that's your fault for even bringing them, what have you. Like, so it would be strange for them to suddenly be like, here's Arcane Journal vampire counts and off you go, right? I think they're going to have to let a lot of water flow under the bridge and, moderate their language a little bit and then eventually bring them back online at some point. And so yeah, I don't see it as something that's going to happen in the next 18 months. I do think it is something that's going to happen in the future. I mean, there's too much money sitting in a warehouse or in some storage unit that they have for them to not start reprinting, I don't know, dark elves or old vampire accounts or what have you. I know that a lot of the dark elves models are still available, but it's a bad example. But still, you understand my point. That they're not going to eventually bring them back. I just don't think it's in the next 18 months. And then when it does happen, I think there's like a sort of a tier to this where if the faction has been entirely redone in AOS and there's just the old sculpts lying around somewhere and there's no crossover anymore and they're narratively tied to sort of where the old world is going right now, I think it makes like they're sort of first in line for when those do get brought back. Like, frankly, I think if the remaining releases for what are they called, Soulblight Gravelords in AOS had come out a year earlier, just before the old world launched, that means that maybe vampire counts would have been one of the core factions at that point because they would have had their old their old model line just ready to be pulled out again and not sort of torn between two games. So yeah, I think there's going to be an order to that. I think vampire counts to me are the most obvious ones that are going to be brought back in to the main line. All the models are there. They're smack bang in the middle of the old world, and it all sort of makes sense. I think stuff like dark elves is for sure one of the ones that's going to make its way back also eventually. Perhaps I would like Skaven. I don't know how they don't eventually reintroduce Skaven into the old world. It's just such an iconic faction in the Warhammer Fantasy Battles universe that I like. It doesn't make sense, and they are very old world centric, with Skaven Blight being sort of in the middle between Tilea and Estalia there. So there's that. Aside from that, I don't know. Ogre Kingdoms are rumored to be getting a full refresh also for AOS, so maybe they'll be up for grabs again sometime soon. But I think definitely vampire counts, dark elves, possibly Skaven are like top of the pile for sure. Danny, what are your thoughts on bringing back legacy factions in the next 18 months?
One army that I definitely see coming back is probably demons, and not just because I play them, mainly because Cathay references having rules against demonic units,
Sure, yeah.
and so did Empire with the Knights Panther, and I think there's a few other thrown
There's
in
a
there.
sword also in the Empire against
Yeah. So, but then I was just like, oh, maybe it's just for the Demon Prince and Chaos Warriors, but that one doesn't have the demonic rule.
You're
So
right.
to
Yep.
me, maybe there's a good chance of demons coming out, and maybe it's not the Arcane Journal, or not. Maybe it's not Arcane Journal. Maybe it's a few units, or like just some lesser demons, or something. But I could still see something coming out in the future.
Mhm.
And demons are in every game system, so it's kind of hard to kind of track what game system they're selling them for. I know
Yeah.
I think their boxes are usually Age of Sigmar
Yeah.
these days.
Yeah, I think they're being pushed a little bit more to the away, like pushed a little bit away in 40K right now.
Yeah, 100%. Like they're, from what I can see from like keeping up to date, they're kind of losing their main book and kind of
Yeah.
going to each of their the sub factions, which kind of sucks for anyone that did build a collection. And even some of the special characters no longer having rules,
Yeah.
which is a little rough. You guys talked about not having units or armies too close to the Age of Sigmar release, but I know when Old World came out, they already had Beastmen previewed before they were even removed from Age of Sigmar.
Mm-hmm.
So there was that whole thing. So that was only a few months apart. And same with some of the Chaos Warrior stuff. Like I think most of their stuff had been replaced
Yeah.
at that point, but there's still, I think there's still even a few units that are still between the two. So I could still see vampire counts coming. I don't see dark elves coming as much as Andrew would like that. Lizardmen, I don't think are coming over. It'd probably be like, I think vampire counts have the most up to date. I'm trying to think of some of the other ones. But yeah, Ogre Kingdoms, if they did get a refresh, then they would. But until they get their entire line refreshed, and Skaven, I think, still have a few units as holdovers from older editions. I think, I don't know if they ever got rid of the clan Scryer stuff. I think a lot of that is still some older edition stuff.
Largely got replaced, I think, with the new
Okay.
AOS 4.
Okay, so they did. I know they got new war machines and stuff, but I wasn't sure if they're like acolytes and stuff like that got replaced.
Yeah, the acolytes, yes, got replaced.
And the plague monks, I think, are still old world
They are
ones.
still in use. Yeah, they are.
Yeah, so there's still like a lot of, there's still some stuff that's older that's being used, but I would love to see Skaven come back, but I think it's still in the a ways away. And yeah, Chaos Dwarves, they not being plastic, I think hurts them. I would love for them to get love for them to have a whole new range and kind of go back to that new aesthetic, but because I know they had some really nice big hat variants for Blood Bowl, which is really nice to see, but it wasn't as crazy as the 90s ones.
No, it wasn't.
There were like kind of a nice,
yeah, it was like a mix
of
of the two aesthetics.
Yeah, still got like some of
and,
the up to date kind of aesthetic, like 90s aesthetic, modernized, I guess.
Yeah.
So hat's a little smaller, their nose and tusks are still there. Some of those like common aesthetics from the older line that the Forge World line didn't have. So it kind of brought them together, which is nice. But I think the biggest one I'm seeing is demons, and I'm hoping, because I would love to have an actual updated army book.
Yeah,
but
that makes sense.
Again, also me wish listing as a demon player.
No, that makes sense though, because they are used across multiple systems and stuff.
Yeah, I had to go grab the Arcane Journal for Cafe. I'm like, I'm pretty sure I remember reading something about demonic in here. I'm like, okay, yeah, they do have the Spirit Lantern. Get to wound rolls of 1, they get to reroll against demonic units.
Yeah.
So unless they come out, like I don't know why they would add that to the book, or these books aren't going to be used for future use.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. Okay, so but do you think in the next 18 months, demons, are you on that train or longer?
It's probably gonna be longer. Like I know they said at the beginning of the edition, demons weren't there for the reason because like they weren't powerful in the world right now, and they had to be summoned in, and that sounded more like Siege of Prague, and that's again also needs Kislev there, so that's still to come.
Yeah, for sure. Not much of a Siege of Prague without them.
Yeah, so like again, they're still away, and you also need some of those special characters that are still, waiting for them. So maybe 18 months. I'm hoping, but more likely
after
past that. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I'll go back to Danny here. What do you think in terms of we're going to get for support for our core factions over the next 18 months? Like, how do you see Arcane Journals evolving, or if they even use that mechanism anymore? Or do you think we're done now with, let's say, Empire until the end of this edition?
I can see maybe each faction gets one more Arcane Journal, maybe an extra, like another Army of Infamy, maybe a character or two, or like release some of the old. Actually, I can't release old characters, but maybe include a little, like one extra unit or 2 extra units, and a couple scenarios, something like they're doing for Cathay's Arcane Journal number 2. Do something like that, but maybe include 1 or 2 special characters. maybe replace a unit, like release
Yeah.
like a new version of a unit, and then have that as the forefront of like the book. So maybe new plastic knights for Empire, and then have conversion bits for some of like maybe now it has conversion bits for not Knights Panther, but maybe like the Blazing Sun or Knights of Moor.
Yeah.
Kind of have that as like, okay, now we have a Knights Moor style army, or something where they're kind of pushed up front.
Yep.
I could see something basic like that, but I wouldn't expect too much more. Like
Agreed.
it'd be pretty soft for the rest of the arcane or the core factions.
Yeah, agreed. I think it's going to be a little bit like hit and miss depending on the faction. I think Arcane Journals are going to evolve 18 months. Like Cathay is sort of the first one that's sort of bucking the trend, but they're going to keep going in that direction. I don't know. Actually, I would be shocked if they did. Here's Arcane Journal Empire of Man version 2, and then it's 2 new armies of infamy and some new units in it, and like so you had to be lugging around your 3 books to play your Empire of Man type army. I think what's going to happen more or less is they're going to shift to like, okay, now we're going to be having the battle of whatever Lorelon Forest Arcane Journal, and in there's going to be 2 specific armies of infamy for 2 different factions that were involved in that battle, and then you're going to get a release of 1 or 2 units or a character for each of those, and then call it a day. It'll keep those armies interesting and fresh, and it's a pretty low key investment from a design perspective. Like what I said earlier in the episode when I was saying, oh, there's going to be a Night Goblin Army of Infamy with like the Squig artillery, I forget how it's called, and the gigantic cave Squig, and then you re-release that and the character on Squig there, the Forge World character on Squig, boss on Squig, and then you just call it a day, right? Like that kind of stuff, I think, is what you can expect if you're one of the core faction players and enjoyers over the next little bit there. Ryan, how do you see support for those factions and the Arcane Journals moving along?
Yeah, I generally agree with what you guys were saying. Like, I think you're going to start seeing factions paired up in them, and it'll just be like one more army of infamy, maybe a new way to use a unit or a new character or something. And I think they may intersperse, like if they're not doing a whole bunch of other releases, we may get either a new unit for a faction like Wood Elves that didn't get a new unit, or maybe a remaster of some other kit, like as Danny said, Empire Knights or whatever. Just as a, like, for example, like they still have not, they like Hippogriff's an option for the Bretonians, but they haven't released any Hippogriff model. So, I think maybe that Forsaken, your Cave Squig, like some of those other things that kind of slipped through and haven't been readdressed, might get.
Yeah, the Imperial Dragon, like all this kind of, there's a lot of
Well,
stuff.
not even that. Like I'm just talking about stuff that's currently in books.
Yeah.
That doesn't exist. Whereas like
Sure, yeah.
if they were to try and reintroduce the Imperial Dragon, they'd have to like rewrite its entire lore.
Sure. Fine. Yeah, I was just thinking like there's a lot of models from the Monstrous Arcanum days that are just ripe for getting pulled back in, right?
That's fair for sure. But anyway, yeah, I think there'll just be little things. That's all. They'll just. But that's where I also think that'll be the filler between the kind of like larger, like Cathay 2 filler, Talea filler, so on and so forth.
Sure. That makes sense. Cool. Anything, and before we transition to the long term, so 2.0 and onwards, anything I missed you guys think will be coming out or prevalent or whatever in the next 18 months?
I think we'll get another FAQ in January.
Yeah, fair. I didn't even think of FAQs, but yeah, we'll get one at some point for sure. Probably 2 at least in the next 18 months, I would say, but yeah. 2, 3. Okay, cool. Let's move on to the long term. So 18 months out from now, we hit edition 2.0. more or less. So what are we assuming we're on that 3-year cycle? How do you see things being kicked off for edition 2.0, Ryan? Do you think it's going to be like a 2-player starter box a la 40K or AOS? You think it's going to be a truckload of new models for an army, like a Kislev box with 50 models in it, or you think it's going to be a range refresh of something? Like, what are you thinking is the kickoff?
As I said earlier, like I do kind of buy into this rumor of a Kislev versus Marauder army, whether it's Norska or whether it's just like a refresh of Marauder models within the Chaos army.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a plausible launch of an edition. And then it would be kind of followed up by Tomb King and Bretonnian battalion boxes, because those don't exist yet.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I agree with you. I think they're moving down that path, and I think it's going to be a 2-player starter box, as you see with 40K or AOS, rather than the Horus Heresy model. I think the Horus Heresy model only works because like 18 out of the, I don't know what it is, 23, 24 factions use all the same models, and so and like 95% of the player base, so it makes sense for to use a box to make a big box that's workable for everybody. But if you just made a
To Heresy's credit, though, they are sold as
yes,
2-player starter
agreed,
sets, even though they're not.
agreed. But I mean, like, doing a box of a juiced up Empire battalion as the like launch for second edition would be a big miss, right? So yeah, I think
though.
it'd be hilarious, but I think it'd be a big miss. I think they're going, so it's going to be 2 players, and I think this is where you bring in Kislev, as like we know they've been working on it since at least 2020. We know that they have all the material for it. They've designed the army book. They have the concept art. They have like all that they need to just get cracking. So yeah, I think that's where it comes in. Kislev definitely, I think, it would be very popular. People are asking for it. So yeah, I think that one to me would be like in a 2-player set would be a strong start to the second edition, accompanied by Norska or what have you, like something else. But yeah, something else that's suitably newish at that point. Danny, what are your thoughts on how they'll kick things off for second edition?
I'm pretty much on board with you guys. Like the Kislev, maybe Norska starter box would be a great way to start off the edition. If they do the 2-player like starter box, most times, actually, I don't know when the last time they had a starter box that didn't include new models. Like
It's
actually have
always
so
new
like
models.
it's always like 2 brand new factions or brand new like miniatures, not reboxing old ones. Like battalion boxes, yes, they'll have old stuff and maybe some new stuff in there. But if they're doing a 2-player starter box, it's definitely going to have 2 brand new factions, new like the new rule book and everything you typically expect. Hopefully, it comes with our artillery die this time, because that you got to include that in a 2-player box set.
Yeah.
Those things are rare to come by, so let's hope they include that. So that's like the big thing. I mean, you guys already talked about having like the big range refresh, and then have the Tomb Kings and Bretonnian have their battalion boxes, and they can also figure out what's not selling well or what they need to include. Like have the knights on foot into the Bretonnian one, but also still include the mounted knights. Do something. Yeah,
Agreed.
I think that's what you can do.
Agreed. Awesome. Cool. So let's move on just here. What do you guys think will happen to the Ravening Hordes, Forces of Fantasy construct, and the Arcane Journals as we head into that second edition? Do you think they're keeping that model? Do you think they're going to, codexes, battle tomes, whatever you want to call them? What do you think about how they're going to treat Armies of Infamy in this potential new edition? Do those 19 existing Armies of Infamy and whatever else gets released between now and 2027 just get dumpstered, or do you think they're finding some way to carry those onwards? Start with Danny.
For me, like as much as I want to keep my Arcane not Arcane Journals, but like the Ravening Hordes. I want them to still be usable, but I can see if like things change for a new edition, they'll have to include new ones. We kind of discussed it earlier. Like I would like to keep them, but to make the game easier for new people, to keep everything kind of moving smoothly for a new edition, they'll likely be including it. And I do prefer the Arcane Journal, sorry, the Ravening Hordes and Forces of Fantasy kind of style, where you have a bunch of factions in one. I think that's a great way to do it, because then if you want to play another faction, you can kind of read through the different factions. It's kind of a nice way to see how other factions work. You can read through them and not have to go and buy these other books to kind of learn about them, or using different websites to scroll through. Like I like to physically have a book to scroll through and read through.
Yeah.
That's the big thing for me. The armies of infamy, I could see them going to the wayside much, but I hope they include them in some way, or maybe they have the Tracian War Host, but maybe they have a different version of the Trace army, or maybe you have you bring Core Hill, and then you can unlock Woodsman. Maybe you don't have the Lion Guard, but you still have kind of aspects of it, and you can kind of recreate it, but not 100% the same. So I can see them maybe doing that way, but I can see them going away. Because they've made throughout the years, like during 6th edition, we had tons of different variants on army lists that were like viable, and people built armies based on these. Like the Storm of Chaos had tons of variant army lists, and then post that, it's like, okay, the entire army is just gone. All those unit entries just disappeared. Like I converted up these unit for demons that were called the Changebringers, which are flamers riding on discs, and they were only ever in that book, and then they've disappeared since then. I think they actually had rules in Total War, but they're gone now for the most part. But I would hope that we have some way of reusing those armies of infamy in the new edition.
Fair. Ryan, what are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, so I certainly think I kind of hit it on earlier. I personally think they're going to switch to army books instead of doing another Ravening Hordes Forces of Fantasy, and it dovetails with what Danny was saying to a point, is if they re-release Ravening Hordes Forces of Fantasy, you wind up with this awkward position of, I have my new Forces of Fantasy, is my Arcane Journal from 18 months ago still valid, yes or no? Depending on how everything plays out, and it turns into this awkward, like, it would be real silly for them to like release all this content and all these variable ways to play your army for the first 3 years, and then do what they did during Storm of Chaos and be like, haha, fuck you. Especially for people who went like more offbeat with some of the armies of infamy. So I think they will try to find a way to preserve those. But if they release Ravening Hordes Forces of Fantasy, then they either need to release a whole bunch of like patch errata for all of those Arcane Journals, and now you also have the like, yes, we're moving forward with new core rulebooks, but also you can still use all of these random old books from the previous edition until they maybe get replaced. Whereas if you just issued a new core rulebook and carried forward Ravening Hordes Forces of Fantasy and all of the Arcane Journals until it's like, okay, here is Army Book Bretonia that just packages up everything. Yes, I know you don't get the nice Forces of Fantasy, like flip through everything book, but it's a more streamlined way to like roll out points changes, unit entry changes, etc. in the new edition. And they've demonstrated to us they can do that very rapidly. So like maybe in a new edition, they prioritize getting those 9 books out, in the first 12 months, and then focus on new content beyond that or something. I don't know. But I don't see Ravening Hordes Forces of Fantasy as like a sustainable way to keep that, or else it's going to be like Ravening Hordes Forces of Fantasy and this third book that's a compendium of Armies of Infamy.
Yeah. No. Yeah.
Buying 4 books. It's going to be awesome.
Yeah, I mean, this yeah, I'm not totally sure on this one either. I think so what I will say is unlike you guys, I really want them to stick to the Forces of Fantasy Ravening Hordes model plus the Arcane Journals because I think it breaks the mold for GW where you don't go down the road of like what 40K and AOS have become where it's like, okay, we get an edition changed and now we just hop on the on the codex treadmill for the next 3 years, and every few months, one of these armies will get a book, and everybody else is just stuck, waiting around until they get their thing that rewrites their faction. On top of that, I really like the Arcane Journal model of, this isn't a rewrite of your faction. This is a pair of new slants in which you can take your army list building and like a handful of new units. And it really, yeah, I think that is a way more engaging and like engaging model than the alternative of here's a new rule book and like you guys will see when you get your own personal army book how things shake out for you. And on the plus side, supporting that model, at least from my perspective, is the Horse Heresy is adopting the Arcane Journal model from Old World. They're calling them something else. They're calling them like Tactica journals or whatever, but nonetheless, it's like the same length type of book, introduces a few new units, has a few new little things in it, rather than doing anything more along the lines of what like battle tomes or codexes or what have you. So that's a good sign. And another sort of added benefit of keeping this model is, and I've mentioned it, but like when you do roll over, everybody starts with like a clean slate at the same time, and you don't have to wait 2 years, for instance, to get your book, or maybe your book doesn't even get released that edition, which we've seen in the past, right? So,
my only concern, really, and that brought me to how I got to my previous point, is I'll use the Empire Arcane Journal as an example. So we get a new Forces of Fantasy, and then it's the like, what happens now? There's a couple options, right? Is I can keep using that Arcane Journal. Cool, that's great. Or it promptly gets just completely overwritten and is gone. Which is less great. Okay, I can keep using it. Let's just go with that one. And then, 2.0 Empire Arcane Journal comes out. Either they're going to sell me 75 to 90% of the same content I already had in the first Arcane Journal.
Yeah.
But, as the 2.0 version, or they're going to sell me new content, but then tell me because it's from this edition, I can't use the old one, and then I just lose what I had. Or we live in Bizarro world where I wind up with 2 Empire Arcane Journals and a Forces of Fantasy book that I can use. That's effectively unheard of in the last decade of Games Workshop gaming. So that's my only concern is it's like, okay, treadmill of codex releases versus, I lose my Nuln army. Or I get sold a book that has no new content in it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a tough one. And like my last point was like the Arcane Journal the Armies of Infamy, I'm not sure how they shake out, like how that shakes out, because and it sort of is going towards what you're getting at, Ryan, and like there's going to be a point where they can't just keep carrying things forward because like we're already up to close to 20 Armies of Infamy at this point. There's like 19 with the Jade Fleet. Let's say a year and a half from now we got another 10. You got 30, but like, okay, they all carry out in some way, shape, or form through the various mechanisms you've identified in the second edition. But then we add on another 40 or whatever. Like by the time third edition rolls around, you can't be forever carrying on these rules of like from 7-8 years ago for, I don't know, the war host of Krash, right? Like there's going to be some way, right? Yeah.
But this is also where, like, again, I also agree with you that the Ravening Hordes Forces of Fantasy thing is a better model for a game. But just from a, like, float perspective, that's where I
Yeah.
think if you were to give me, you know, Army Book Bretonia that has Grand Army, Errantry Crusade, um, Border Princes, and then maybe one more Army of Infamy in it,
Yeah.
instead of doing a whole nother edition of 2, and then you're right, like, you wind up with a situation where by the end of second edition, every army has 5, like,
Yeah.
army formats. Like, they'll eventually just have to find a different thing. They can't just keep doing that.
Yeah.
Um, but you put the brakes on it a little bit if you go, here's an army book. Maybe you only get those same 3 armies of infamy, but we give you some new units and slot them into them or
Sure.
whatever. Like,
Yeah.
that's all. Is
Yeah.
um
Or
they're
maybe it
it's in a
becomes
weird spot.
yeah, or maybe it becomes like, because we're foreseeing that potentially the transition from Old World 1 to 2 is not going to be a super hard reset. Then maybe the Arcane Journals, the Armies of Infamies carry over for that one, because the fundamental rules of the game don't switch that much, don't change that much. But then at the third edition, 4.5 years in the future, then that one is just like, well, they're all getting shit canned now because the game has radically shifted, right? Uh,
Yeah.
Maybe sort of that's the way they shake it out. But yeah, at least from a personal perspective, I sure hope that there's a way to keep playing Wolves of the Sea and Minotaur Bloodherds moving forward, but we'll have to see. Okay, let's talk about a few other things here. So over the theoretical span of this second edition, let's call it like a 27 to 30, 2030 timeline. What do you guys think we're going to be getting? So let's start with the most exciting stuff. New factions. Do you guys foresee any new factions in that second edition coming out, entirely new factions? And if yes, which ones are you thinking are going to be up?
So for
Danny, sorry,
myself,
Danny.
yeah. For myself, I'm well. We kind of know that Kislev is coming at some point. They're integral to this whole old world plot of the Siege of Prague, so they're coming at some point, either end of first edition or sometime during second. So they're definitely coming. We know maybe Norska's coming. We have some rumors of Tilia. The other one I would love to see, and I know people have a soft spot in their heart, is for like the zombie pirates, like the vampire pirates. Have them come back. I would love to see them as like a fleshed out army. They had rules back in sixth edition, and they've also been expanded on greatly through Total War. So I could definitely see them having a whole actual army range. And I mean, looking at Total War is probably just a good spot to theory craft and kind of figure out what you kind of want, because they've taken all the core factions plus the legacy factions, and then even expanded upon that with Cathay and some of these other ones. Because love like the vampire pirates or vampire coast, however you want to call them. So I could definitely see them as being the ones coming out. Besides those ones, I don't really think of too many. Like for an actual new faction, like having that many new factions already is huge.
Mm-hmm.
Because I played during sixth edition, the one new faction was Ogre Kingdoms,
Yeah.
and it wasn't very common for things to come out. And I also wouldn't want them to release too many, because then we might get into the point where it's similar to Age of Sigmar, where a new faction comes out and like, cool, here comes the swamp orcs. They come out, and then it's like, here's
Yeah.
their units, and that's it. Nothing for
Forest
years. Like,
goblins.
yeah, like there's just, you don't want to have that point where like now we have nothing for this army for multiple years, and
Yeah.
it's like, cool, that's like not really enough. Like I have to keep spamming, or not spamming, but taking 3 of these units just to fill out my special, or like this is my one good unit out of like 4.
Yeah.
And even in Cathay, it's like I have two units, like 2 infantry units, or an infantry unit and a cavalry unit, and then I have cannons. You got blimps. You got the statues, and then just a bunch of characters. So it'd be nice if they expand a little bit more on those, but I can understand that as like an initial release. But hopefully we don't go to the point where like there's a bunch of like small armies with like no cool models in them, or not a full army.
Yep. No, that's definitely something to guard against for sure. Yeah, Ryan, what are your thoughts on new factions for second edition?
Honestly, I think second edition you'll see. I counted this as a new faction, but like you'll see another Cathay wave.
Okay.
I think you'll see that like just kind of bulk them out a little bit since we know it's not happening this time. We already talked about Kislev, possibly Norska, etc. And honestly, like I'm kind of at a loss of like I do think they'll try and fit in another new thing. But like when I look at the time period we're in the scenario, like I can't think of things, but then again, Cathay didn't make sense for that either, and they just found a way to shove it in there.
Yeah.
So maybe they'll release something that's a foil for Cathay.
Sure.
So that they have a because Cathay is not going to ship peasants halfway around the world to go fight
forever.
stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like maybe if they release something like refreshed ogres or the hobgoblin khanate or chaos dwarves,
The blood nagas of Koresh.
yeah, like just something so that they can then justify, well, here's some more units for Cathay, but units that don't necessarily make sense, having sailed all the way to Warhammer Latvia. So, maybe that, but I also think that they're going to, I don't think that they'd touch like Ind or Nippon with like a 10-foot pole. So,
No, yeah.
Who knows? Anyway,
Yeah,
I
that's
just think
interesting.
that's kind of space they might play around in.
Yeah, I agree with you. I forgot to mention it in like the next 18 months, but I think the second wave of Cathay, like sure it's not coming along with the Arcane Journal, which is going to be between now and the end of year almost certainly. But like I think there's going to be something for them in the next 18 months also, because like you don't want to leave an army on like seven kits for like the next 4 years. Like that's just not really tenable, I think. And they must have had bigger plans for it than that for sure. So, anyways, yeah.
You say it's not tenable, but that's exactly what happened to the Nurgle Marines, the Khorne Marines, and is currently happening with the Emperor's Children for 40K.
Fair. Yeah, that's a good point. Fair.
But Thousand Suns are there too. They have like two actual units.
Like Thousand Suns
Man,
just finally got a second set of new units, and they're weird fucking Jaffa robots.
Yeah, those aren't great. But even the Zangors were like ported over from Age of Sigmar to give them more. So you can't even count them.
On 4 units now. Yeah. Oh yeah. So okay, fair, but still. I hope we're not going down. We don't want that to happen. Okay, but anyways, parking the Cathay issue for a bit there. I think in that second edition, for me, it's pretty clear that Kislev is coming back, or is arriving at that point. I already mentioned. I think it's going to be the big kickoff seller for that second edition, and I think Vampire Coast is coming in during the second edition. I don't want to say guaranteed, but like I think it's highly likely, just because again they've been totally designed and remade for the Total War games, which means they have an army book written, which means they have all the art that they need to get sculpting. They've written all the lore, like everything's done in the same way that it was for Cathay, in the same way that they've confirmed through the old world, the almanacs that they've done for Kislev. So yeah, I can't foresee a situation where that faction does not come out, or it would be a massive miss if it didn't come out anyways. So I think I'm thinking two brand new product lines for second edition. I'm not sure that I'd push to 3 as sort of Ryan was hinting at. Maybe like I think there's scope for something like the Hobgoblin Khans or Koresh or some sort of foil for Cathay. That's a very Like, I think that's a very solid and interesting point, and I think like narratively would make a ton of sense. But I'm not willing to go there yet for like a second edition. At some point, like they're not going to keep releasing every single year a brand new army either. Like things are going to max out. So yeah, I'm thinking two new factions for the next edition. Cool. Returning legacy factions. Do you guys think in the next, the 27 to 30 timeline is where we're going to start to have that discussion? And we've already talked about which ones we think are first, but like, what do you think about returning factions, Ryan, in that second edition context?
Yeah, I think if it's going to happen, it's going to be at edition rollovers when they get added.
Yeah.
Or at least like the indicators that they're going, like for example, if we get a second edition rule book and it's got, random fluff text section like the Norska one that we currently have, but about vampire counts or whatever. I think that it'll be the edition. Like, I don't think we'll see them this edition. I think next edition's a maybe for maybe two of them, and then going forward, or like who knows? Like maybe if they do Vampire Coast, they do like Vampire Counts and Vampire Coast together somehow creatively. So, but anyway, there's a bunch of ways they can skin that cat, but I think the opportunity to change the status quo with legacy factions only really exists at edition turnovers.
Okay, yeah, that's a fair point. Danny, do you agree with that, or are you thinking?
That definitely makes sense. Like I do like that idea of like the new edition comes out and you can kind of port them over because you can add that into like the lore aspect. Like maybe there's a bit of a time jump too within the new edition, like 2.0. Maybe
Sure.
it's 15 years in the future. So now vampires are starting to come back, and like I definitely think vampires is gonna come back. The idea of like even armies of infamy, you can have them themed around each of the different bloodlines. You can almost do as well have an army of infamy similar to that of Wolves of the Sea. Be the vampire pirates. So then you have, you still get access to your basic zombies and wolves and a couple of those units, but then you're adding in like the pirate unit, their deck droppers, like their cannons and stuff, and you kind of add those rules in there. You only need to bring in like maybe 3 or 4 units, and then you're good there. So I could see something like that, but I mean that's probably not what people want. People want the full the full vampire pirates, but yeah, legacy. Like I don't see a ton of them coming over. I know, like Ryan's saying, probably 2, and I could see the same thing. Like again, I see demons eventually coming. Maybe not at the beginning, but later on, you got vampire counts. They just got all refreshed in Age of Sigmar, so all their models are ready to come over. And it seems weird now that I'm saying it. I'm like, oh boy, we get to use all the scraps from Age of Sigmar for the old world.
Welcome to the old world. Yeah,
we get all the old scrap models.
Yeah,
but yeah, I could see. Yeah, maybe even 3, but not a ton. And even still, it's going to be who knows how long after the edition comes that they would even be released.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I think this is the right time frame to start talking about legacy factions coming back. And I like Ryan's point of, the edition switch is over. These are going to be our legacy factions, and oops, vampire counts and demons, for instance, are no longer part of the legacy factions. I think that's definitely like it's more realistic than thinking it's going to happen over the next year or so for sure. So I think 2 maybe also makes sense. I think vampire counts are definitely first in line. I would say demons probably is a second one to sort of round out that next 3-year period. So I'm going to go with 2 like you guys, and I'm going to go with vampire counts and demons. We're getting closer to the Siege of Prague a little bit. Maybe chaos is on the ascendant. It is actually, or it's going to be. and suddenly there's a little bit more demons popping around. So, yeah. Cool. Next one, model or range refreshes. Do you guys think we're going to be like? Do you think those are realistic expectations over the next 3-year period, or do you think we need more time before we start looking at that kind of stuff? Start with Danny.
I could see partial refreshes, like go to Tomb Kings, replace their skeletons, bring out new skeletons, bring out anything that's pre 2000s. I would say that. Like, I think a lot of armies are pretty good for having models that are at least from 7th edition, because they did a lot of 7th edition refreshes
Yeah.
in 8th edition. So I could see them kind of picking those factions, and definitely for Tomb Kings, like they've already people who are playing Tomb Kings have already bought models. So now people that see new skeletons will probably like, oh, now if I wasn't playing Tomb Kings, maybe now I'll jump in because now they have cool new skeletons.
Yeah.
I don't expect them to do an entire army though. That's like a huge, huge undertaking because a lot of these armies already have a ton of units. But like
Yeah.
again, I mentioned earlier Empire Knights, like maybe redoing those. The state troops are still relatively new. I know Ryan, you don't enjoy building them, but they're
Only the
relatively.
halberds.
Oh, don't isn't the same thing with spears?
Oh no, but like it's a great 4-part model. It's just the 5th part that sucks.
Oh, okay, yes, yeah. So like I could see some armies like High Elf Spearmen, they need a refresh, but it's usually like certain aspects of armies that need a refresh. Like even like in High Elves, they updated the Illyrian Reavers. Like they only had models in the old 8th edition starter box, so they actually released a kit, which is great, but they didn't refresh the models from I think probably 98. I think is when the Spearman came out. So I would like them just modernize a lot of those older kits. Realistically, that's my minimum expectations of a new edition because you already have all these models out. Now you can update them to kind of push sales when a new army comes out. Because like looking at old 40k over the last couple of years, an army comes out with a new book and it gets maybe one new character, and that's about it. And it's been like that for even Age of Sigmar as well. Like usually it's, I think now they're starting to push out a few more, but it's for a while. Like I felt like a couple years it was just like here's your army book and here's your new character, and now we're gonna go to the next faction and do the same thing. So hopefully we just get 1 or 2 units per army if they do a update like an army book or new Arcane Journals. They also update a few units.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to be a bit more of a naysayer than you guys on this one. I think it's still way too early to be having that discussion in terms of like returning models and ranges. Ranges stick around for a long time in the GW catalog. Like the last army to be introduced into the Warhammer Fantasy Battles World Ogre Kingdoms was over 20 years ago at this point. Cathay aside there for a second, and all of its models are still kicking around in the AOS line right now and have not been refreshed. Like those, and even when you think like 40k, those Eldar models that came out last year, I bought as a small child. Like they must have been over 25 years old, those sculpts, and they were still kicking around. So like to think that within 3 to 5 years of the game launching, they're redoing lines. Like I cannot see it at all. I think it's way too early. Like maybe they redo a thing here or there. Like they're calling it. I don't know how the actual term, but like is it they're remastering the sculpts or whatever as they're moving from fine cast to more like updated resin, or metal to more updated resin, like with the Empire War Wagon, the Illyrian Rivers, and that kind of stuff. Like I think that can totally happen. But I don't see wholesale range refreshes or even really significant model swaps happening over the next 3 years. Ryan, did I ask you on this one? I think I skipped you, right?
Not yet, no. But
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
I think in the next 3 to 4 years, it'll largely prioritize, as I said, those missing things, the hippogriff, the Forsaken,
Yeah.
etc. a handful of new units to add to various factions in some way, whether it's a character or just some novelty that they didn't have. I think we'll see that before we start seeing like refreshes of things. However, on the assumption that this is a success and it keeps trucking along, I think when we get to that third edition, you might start to see some things like, you know, um, maybe like Empire Knights or Bretonian
Great
Cavalry,
troops.
like Bretonian Knights getting redone. Um, thing like some of the older things, or actually what I think even more is less the plastics and more some of the things that are only in metal or resin but are still needed
Yeah.
in any amount of volume. I
Mhm.
think you might start to see replacements for those because like metal casting is cheaper to do like s- as a startup cost.
Yeah, as a mom
Um,
and pop shop. Yeah.
yeah, but like if you want to long term produce a large number of like Grail Knights, um, spend the $25,000 on an injection
Yeah.
mold, as opposed to just having people like pour lead into. It's not lead, but anyway. Um, but that's all. I think that's the remastering or the replacing of range items will be more of a like third kind of wave of the game thing.
Sure.
I also think that there is a certain amount of this game that is still pulling on nostalgia
Nostalgia. Yep.
levers. Like there are some models that I absolutely hate that people are like, "Oh, I love these." I think by the time you get to a third edition of the game, um, we're talking 2030 and beyond at that point.
Yeah.
Um, the demographic of people playing the game will be include more people who picked it up in the present
Yeah.
as the like people who played, third and fourth edition Warhammer Fantasy Battle
Start to
kind
time
of
out. Yeah.
age out of
Yeah. Yeah.
things. Um, and like you see that with, for example, you mentioned the old Eldar models. Like, yes, the Warp Spiders came out in like 97 or 99. The Falcon had been out since like 95.
Yeah.
Um, the Viper was like the oldest model in 40K at one point. Um, but you reached a point where like the 40K player base no longer had people that were like, I have nostalgia for super old derpy warwalkers or
Yeah.
whatever. Like people are just it's actually funny when I engage with 40K sometimes and just like people near my own age um who never played until like 8th edition and beyond are a huge part of the game's demographic now.
Hmm.
And I think we talked about this when you and I talked about like Heresy
Yeah.
3.0 earlier, is like the 90s nostalgia lever is gonna stop working for Games Workshop soon
Hmm.
because like people in their mid 50s into their 60s is not
The main
the like
driving force of the
prime
hobby.
demographic of
Yeah.
this hobby.
Yeah.
Um and so it's and that's actually just complete aside, that's why I think reintroducing like second ed 40K stats into Horus Heresy 3.0 was a mistake, but that's a whole other thing.
I mean,
um
we had a
so I,
big conversation about that at CTC.
yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah, so it's just one of those, like, I do think that they're gonna have to start replacing things like the old metal tree men and stuff, because when you get into 2030 heading towards 2035,
Yeah.
You're just gonna have people being like, "I'm not interested in buying stuff
That
that
would
looked like it was made in my grandfather's basement from a multi-billion-dollar corporation."
yeah, from like
Uh,
15 years before I was born at that point. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So I think there will be some updating, um, but obviously trying to respect what the old world is, because again, if they change fundamentally what it is after going through all of this effort to bring it back, it's just unfathomably silly. Like,
Yes. Yes. Agreed. Yeah, agreed. I think you're onto something. Like you're right. Like the nostalgia at some point will stop working. Like, man, there's already some. Like, I didn't play Warhammer Fantasy Battles in like the good old days when Empire ogres were a thing, and when those came back out, I was like, those are way too derpy for me to ever get like to ever include in anything I'm doing. So that doesn't work for me. But I can't imagine, like, you're right, almost 10 years into the future from now, just how people would feel about those. Even some of them right now are like as I mentioned, extremely derpy, like the freaking the beast packs. How are people who have no no attachment to old versions of this game going to feel about those derpy old leopards and wolves sculpted in 1988 and 2032, so anyways.
or don't forget Lord Flipper Hands.
Yeah, exactly. Lord Flipper Hands and all the ham-fisted elves. Yeah, I mean, yeah, we're gonna need to get somewhere at some point. You're right. Okay, so anything I haven't mentioned before I close this off, Danny, in terms of what you were saying for that second edition.
I got nothing else you guys haven't already covered.
Cool, Ryan.
No, I think we're good.
All right, perfect. So, all right. Thank you, listeners out there, for sticking around with us on this one. Bit of a good, I think, change of pace from the constant barrage of content coverage we've been doing over the last 2 months. So, yeah, thank you for sticking with us. Make sure you get your tickets for all the events we've got coming up in our neck of the woods. Make sure you follow us on all the socials, on Facebook. Join our Discord channel. It's starting to pop up and come to life in there. So we'd love to have you along for the ride. Follow us on Instagram, all that good stuff. So, Ryan, anything you wanna plug before we close this one out?
No, just Capital City Bloodbath by name. Please come to it. It's going to be a good time.
Awesome, Danny. Anything you want to plug?
I got nothing to plug. I guess I'll see some of the players, some people out at July 20th. If not,
Both of
I
us
might.
will be here. Actually, all
Yeah,
three of
yeah,
us will be there. Yeah.
yeah. So everyone will be there. So yeah, come and meet the people.
Awesome.
Otherwise, yeah. I'm missing out on Capital City, but hopefully I'll still be able to pop in or keep an eye on it. But nothing else
Yep.
to shout out right now.
Awesome. Perfect. Okay. Thank you for being with us, and we'll catch you around next time.